Arousal
Yeah,
is important for great facilitation
yeah,
of action.
yeah,
And as I was saying, it's motocross is 180 beats a minute the whole race.
yeah,
So across 190 tactical decision making, uh, tremendous fine motor, gross motor response, balance issues, the rest of it.
yeah.
Formula One, 200, 210, as they're going under heavy G forces,
Yeah.
uh, and great decision making and performance.
Do,
We
do
we
you do you think there is a difference between the stress response with all those things like the heartbeat and so on, and let's say what is it in English? And anxiety, no, not anxiety, I fear. Is there a biological difference and also a different result, do you think? Because here, my colleagues here in Holland, if I'm quoting them rightly, they say it's stress is the stress response is the stress response. But
no. And I can I share a little bit of history
yeah,
of
of
this
course,
with you?
yeah,
Okay. Okay. The issue with sympathetic arousal is it is all or nothing. And that's a critical component. The deer being attacked by the lion or the gazelle by the lion doesn't decide, oh, I need to get blood from my intestines to my muscles. I better defecate and urinate because if I get hit, I might poison my innards. So I better pee and poop. So if I get hurt, it's
yeah,
or I
yeah,
need, yeah, all of it. It's all or nothing. It's
yeah,
bang. It's right up there. Okay, that's critical because one of the things that's characteristic of emotional arousal is muscle tension, as we saw.
yeah,
Jacobson in 1920, long before Cannon developed this concept, Walter Cannon,
yeah.
that we have fear and anger and freeze, fight, flight, and freeze. Jacobson, 1920, realized that if you could relax the muscles, you could defeat anxiety.
Mm,
Lazarus in the 60s started looking not only at Jacobson's relaxation therapy, but cognitive intervention strategies for changing how people looked at things, whether or not it was fear or something they could master. Lazarus, 19, a
wow.
psychotherapist.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, right. And he was using relaxation and desensitization. It is now called exposure therapy.
yeah,
But he was having people think about, like, if you're afraid of snakes,
yeah,
visualize a snake,
yeah,
relax, control your breathing, right? Lazarus, 1968, with dealing with deep muscular relaxation and imagery, cognitive intervention in that stress response. And the issue is, if you can bring down one, we're looking at breathing, but these guys are looking at something different. If we can change our perception of what it is, it's that as a challenge or a threat. If we can
yeah,
change our perception, we change our response,
yeah,
as well as changing the response by gaining control of one of the factors in the arousal, like breathing.
yeah.
If I can change my breathing, by the way, it needs practice. You can't just go, I'm going to do breathing today and I'm going to reduce my stress.
No.
Under stress, you need practice. I know because I tried it without practice. It
Yeah,
doesn't work
it doesn't work.
without
No,
practice.
no.
Okay. Green was looking at voluntary control in the 1970s, and I did this. I built an instrument that measured muscular tension. In
Mm,
1972, I was doing therapy with muscular tension, but also with measuring blood flow. Because one of the characteristics of stress is the reduction in blood flow to the periphery.
yeah,
We get cut, we get eaten, we get bit, we bleed less,
yeah.
but we can control our blood flow to our periphery. I was able to get people's hands warm to 3 degrees. The research is 5 degrees, changing blood flow. What we do and how we gain control of the sympathetic system some element, we can tear all of it down to whatever level we were able to bring that unit to. So those people who control their breathing, have the long, slow exhale, or the what's the inhale response? Yeah, the
sigh.
The physiological sigh,
Yeah.
Huberman's stuff.
Yeah.
It really, it's extremely helpful, but it's helpful not only because it does what the effect on the vagus nerve, but also because it tends to change the breathing process, which lowers everything down to that level. So it's really working productively on the sympathetic arousal system.
Yes.
Vickers has found a regulation of that with visual focus.
Yes.
And with control over the eye by the orbital frontal cortex and the linkage of that through the insula, influence of the insula as well into the amygdala and the hippocampus. But Huberman is suggesting this wide vision. I don't know of the research behind it, but given all the other research that says if we can begin to change tunnel vision, which is part of the arousal response, that narrow focus on threat, plus in humans, it's the dilation of the pupil, which allows us to see a threat at 20 feet and beyond under low light, which is when the animals have hunted us.
Yeah.
If we can begin to impact that, theoretically, it has the same effect as if we're controlling vascularity, muscle tension, breathing. It tends to kind of collapse all of the sympathetic arousal to a particular level.
So it's the form. I heard Huberman saying that stress influences vision. So bidirectional, we could say that vision influences stress.
Stress influences vascularity. If we influence vascularity, we increase the performance over stress. Muscle tension is increased by stress. We change the muscle tension, we change the stress.
Yeah.
But one of the interesting things with Lazarus is Lazarus was looking at cognitive intervention strategies, and he paired his relaxation training with symbols. So if, for instance, you began to feel yourself tighten up, he was able to classically condition an image of a stop sign with a relaxed condition, and he used imagery to totally offset the arousal response.
Wow.
There are so many ways we can tackle this. Our concern, and you have voiced that concern here, our concern is prior to an entry on a door, like with an assault team.
Yes.
That's not when we need a reduction of stress.
No.
It's when the officer hits the door and is going through, that's when we need the facilitation of emotional arousal for an effective outcome.
Yeah.
And we think what Huberman's working on with vision, but most importantly, what Vickers and Williams are suggesting really lies in really creating a high level of effective arousal in the middle of a really highly threatening situation that really facilitates great performance.
Yes.
And I think it is the eye and the brain that really is the frontier of emotional utilization.
And because if all this is, of course, all this is true, but we practiced in Holland the scan and breathe, of course, like most military do. But for most of the time, I saw it like the scan was just like an operational thing to see if there are other opponents and so on and so on. The breathing was for self-regulation. But if the scan is also like arousal.
Oh, it's cognitive, perceptual and cognitive.
Yeah.
It's mindful, right?
Yeah.
We get the same thing here. You fire on the range, scan. It's a great neck exercise.
Yeah.
Does nothing to build the eye and the brain.
Exactly.
And that's the skill you're talking about, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You combine breathing with that scanning. But you see, part of what this also has an effect, which is really important, is the officer now has a sense of control.
Yes, perceived
And
control.
that is so critical.
Yeah.
Of all of the officers I've interviewed over 3,000 officers, advisory council that have made a deadly force decision, totally apart from SEAL teams, Delta teams, Force Recon, our special forces. And every single one of them that has done well has had an external, narrow focus of attention that is being used to help them solve the problem. And I think that focus does tremendous things on the body and the brain.
Can you repeat that one? Because now, external focus of attention.
Right?
I think I know what you're talking about, but please.
It's an external, narrow focus of attention.
Yeah.
Now, okay, and what they're trying to do with that is figure out what they can do to make this work to solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And that perception combined with the use of the vision to facilitate this control over the environment, seeking control over the environment, really facilitates stuff in the brain and also the usefulness of arousal in the body.
Yeah.
And that's tremendous. And by the way, you can be shot and still operate under that condition. I've interviewed some of our Marines, for instance, that one guy was shot right in the chest with an AK-47. It tore out his left lung. He had a Remington 870 shotgun. He killed the Viet Cong that killed his point person and shot him. And he fought for another half an hour before they were able to drop the ball in the jungle and get him out of the jungle.
Mm-hmm.
He was committed to staying in the fight and solving the problem. And his eye and brain really were the keys to great performance there.
Yeah. And what does all this mean for training police officers? What should I teach?
Bottom line, we start teaching officers to look and see.
Yeah.
Because even if you're working with a survivor of let's say a physical beating or a sexual violence, if you're reading them for the type of persuasion they are most influenced by, you're being productive. You're doing something that helps you to actually accomplish a professional objective. But you're also teaching how to use vision to solve the problem. And you're building, 70% of the information we use is in our head.
Yeah.
And we just finished a study. I mentioned to you, it's a MESA study. It has just been accepted for publication in motor learning. And we found that the officers who did poorly had really severely disorganized perceptual patterns as they're trying to read what is happening. The officers who did very well, and we're talking a pulse level of 180 plus on some of these officers.
Yeah.
The officers who knew what to look, where to look, how to look, facilitated that high level of arousal with great tactical positioning, excellent reading of the threat, and then great response. And what's the difference between the perceptual and cognitively disorganized and the perceptually and cognitively organized?
Yeah.
The experience that gives them the confidence to seek out what they need to know to solve this problem.
Yeah. And this is trainable, isn't it?
It's trainable. That's how these officers got it. We randomly split them up, and then we looked at which ones did better and which ones did poor.
Yeah.
And I tell you, the poor ones that were randomly just distributed with partners through the training, they're all over here on the left, all disorganized in their eye scan and how they position themselves and how they anticipate things. And over here are the experts.
Yeah, great.
Longer, sustained vision, anchored on the threat.
Yeah.
And anchored meaning that they look off and then come back. They seek information and then come back. Information that they might need to help them understand the situation. But they've got an anchor to a point that they know is a key point in how that evolves. And that's training and experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which says that we can have a profound effect on sympathetic arousal. We are not victims to what happens to us.
And this fits nicely. Oh, that's so great, because I interviewed a colleague of mine. Her name is Laura. and she just did a dissertation on being in control for police officers. And it was a sociological study,
Mm-hmm.
and it was about the use of biological concepts by police officers. And one of the how do you say it? One of the things what could happen, according to her, was that if officers think that, oh, I'm getting sympathetic arousal, oh, adrenaline flows, so I'm not in control anymore, then we have a very bad situation. Then,
Yeah. See, what a terrible lesson to teach.
yeah.
The last time I was in starting blocks, I was age 58. I was running in a university track meet.
Aha.
The oldest person was much younger than my youngest child.
So, yeah.
I had to be really good.
Yeah.
My pulse was high. I peed a lot. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. But the intensity I had to have coming out of those starting blocks had to be the most intense that I had been in decades.
Yeah.
I missed first place by less than 3 feet. And it was due to the adrenaline surge and the practice that I had to utilize that and to recognize that the symptom of needing to urinate and the issues of breathing and the narrowed vision and the rest of it were designed to help me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Say, yeah, what a terrible lesson to tell people that our pulse over 150 interrupts great decision making.
Yes, that's the kind of double-edged sword. We talk about it with the knife attacks also, eh? Like if we make them afraid of the knife, then what have we accomplished?
Right. The officers who make great decisions in our MESA study had a pulse over 160 beats a minute, and many were up at 180 beats a minute. Great perception, great tactical mobility, great positioning, great reading, great decision making. And it's all because we were able to get that because we had fidelity between the scenario and the real world encounters that police officers get in.
Yeah.
And you can look at Simon Baldwin's research and the rest of it.
Yeah.
Officers routinely will be running 160 beats a minute.
Yeah.
And they approach us, well, we need to calm that down. And we're going, like, just a minute. If you are finally, for the first time in your life, encountering someone with the intent and ability to kill you who's acting on it now, I want you at your peak.
Yeah.
I want you ready to respond. I want you to read accurately and correctly everything that's going on.
Yeah.
I want you primed to make the best decision possible under those circumstances. And that means high levels of arousal under cognitive control.
Yeah. Yeah, great. I just read a book, and I'm not sure if it's here. It's called Cognitive Dominance.
Yeah.
It's from a neurosurgeon.
Yep.
And who was also a wrestler. You know the guy? Mark
No,
McDonald.
I don't. No, but it makes tremendous sense.
Yes, it's beautiful because then he talks about being, how do you call it? Make a surgery inside the head and so on, and that but he has to stay in cognitive control, even if he freaks out, and then it comes to whole. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Vickers did an interesting study for the Canadian Surgical Association. And she found that expert surgeons, like expert pilots, like expert officers in our Belfast study with her, like experts in athletics, all sports, have a great deal of ability to perceive what is going on. They recognize they've got a schema about how that information fits. They've got a pattern, and they recognize what the potential outset is going to be. And subsequently, they're better prepared.
So we have to teach them again in a lot of scenarios, a lot of variation, and so on and so on. Yeah.
Right. You're right. This is what you advocate.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. You get no variability if you don't teach variability. You've got to have that variability. And the question is, why aren't we doing it?
Yeah.
Why do we settle for less and then have the officer pay the price or the citizen pay the price because we have not trained those we send to do the most difficult job in society the best we can.
Yeah.
We check the box with training.
Yeah.
We did an assessment of training for the United Kingdom, for Canada, and the US at the request of the Police Federation of England and Wales.
Yes.
And we all train the same way in these three countries.
Yeah.
Check the box, so we've covered this.
Yeah.
It's tragic.
Tragic.
It's tragic what we do to those we send to do work that should be ours, but we can't do it.
Can it also have to be? Then I'll let you go, of course, because it's midday. It's
Yeah, it's almost
yeah.
at 1:30 and the 1:40.
Because it's evening here.
I'm keeping you awake.
No, it's great. But today I work nowadays I work a lot in emergency medicine. So with ambulance personnel, ambulance personnel, and with trauma teams and so on. And what strikes
first responders.
First responders, and what struck me was that they had a kind of clinical mindset when they were doing all those, for me, horrible things like the resuscitation of children, whatever happens. And first I thought, oh, they're like robots, but then I understood that the clinical thing is also, well, to perceive it as clinical so that you not get emotionally overwhelmed. And I wonder if we talk about police, maybe the subject of violence is so delicate that it's difficult to develop a clinical mindset. I'm not sure. Because
you have an interesting perspective there. We speak so much about the need for control.
Yeah.
And how regulatory control is even under high stress.
Yeah.
We found, for instance, we did a study on pursuit drivers in the UK. And we were looking at what their brains were doing in the middle of a pursuit. And in the United Kingdom, it's a month-long training. And we tracked what the brains of officers were doing and how they were able to read and understand. We found something very interesting. The officers who passed their test learned 4 times more, learned how to read 4 times more information out of the environment than they did at the beginning, and then those who failed. But we were asked back because they failed 1/3 of the class. 1/3 of the class could not pass the course. It cost them $85,000 per person to take that month-long course. So this is a very expensive failure. And Dave Blocksidge did a study for us. He put heart monitors on these officers and monitored them all the way through. And we found one thing that was critical, and I think it relates to what you're talking about. The officers who failed, when they had a crisis situation, and these officers would travel up to 150 miles per hour on the outsides of London, chasing a rabbit, or inside town, they would go 110 miles an hour inside town where permitted. Or if you're going against the flow of traffic in front of Harrods and a kid steps out, your pulse will skyrocket. You will do the correct thing because you're well trained, but the officers who failed, their arousal stayed up long after that problem was over with. And the officers who passed, as soon as that was over, their pulse started to drop. And the issue is why. And Vickers has the answer. External narrow focus of attention on attempting to solve a problem is tremendously emotionally regulatory.
Yes.
It's a facilitation of arousal for effective performance. And I'll take it back to here. I taught in a law enforcement police program here for 28 years, directed it, was chairperson of the University Department of Government. And we often would send students out for residencies or internships. And the trauma they had in the situations like what you're talking about were really high. They watched somebody with their chest split open, with their head crashed, and they stood there and watched, helpless. The people who are working to try to solve the problem had much less emotional repercussions. It has to do with, is it a challenge or is it a threat? And when you're inside your own head, you're in trouble.
It also reminds me of the World Health Organization has a document about psychological first aid to refugees. And the first thing they do is get them back in control and solve some little problem, like like doing a little administrational thing or so on. But it also reminds me of Lazarus, his model, because we had the problem focused versus the emotion focused coping, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
You've been teaching this stuff in your own way.
Yeah.
I just come with a different framework, but it's the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
Is the more we build our skills and the more we learn how to see and read where those skills are applied, the more we provide ourselves with control, with increased variability, with higher level of creativity and problem solving, and the more we are professional. And if we are not provided that by our agencies, the officer in the traffic stop study who practiced when then thinking, who took the ownership of her skill development unto herself. She's a model for us. Because if those that train us and send us out do an inadequate job, we have to take authority ourselves and take the responsibility to make that difference.
Well, so great.
Eric, I really, it's a pleasure meeting you.
Yes,
I've followed you for a long time. And it's a pleasure to share this time with you and to give me a chance to share some of my ideas.
Great.
You see, we're simpatico. We're simpatico.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. Yeah. Thank you so much. And I'm sure we talk again.
I hope so. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much. And well, have a nice day also. And I'm going to sleep.
Okay. And I'll see you get copies of the articles in the papers we're working as well.
Of course, I will, as I always do, I will send all the trainers to Foresign's website and so on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
Bye,
take care. Real pleasure. Bye-bye.